Well, hello, strangers. Now don't touch that dial. You've tuned in to Neon Static, your happening little place on the digital airwaves where every week you get a true, original scary story you won't hear or see anywhere else. And I know, because I'm the one that writes them all up. I'm your host, Viola, and if you have any you'd like to share, check the description for emails or socials. Or there's comments, plus likes and subscriptions if you'd like to know when something's up. Today's story comes from a friend I met overseas, which is funny because when we returned to Conus, it turned out we'd grown up in the same rural town. So when he told me about this story, I was able to picture it a lot more than most, and it really stuck with me. Here's hoping it sticks with you too. It's story 209, and here's what happened. Urban exploration, or Urbex, was a big deal when I was growing up. My friends and I got sucked into watching YouTubes and movies and TV shows, all about people wandering, sometimes sneaking, into abandoned houses and buildings, and taking a look around. Some of the places were obvious gimmies. Abandoned asylums and hospitals, or amusement parks, the cheery colors peeling like leprosy, the echoes of laughter and popcorn smells faded to rot and decay. A lot of the abandoned places were obviously abandoned twice, first by their primary owners, and then again by the packs of faceless people who seemed to find their way in, like bloodhounds, and proceed to throw the same degenerate parties, smash windows and mirrors, graffiti curse words, leave behind empty bottles and other paraphernalia. The expectations were so standard, it was like they were following a checklist to reduce a somber, abandoned home into a dirty wreck for no reason beyond they could. But occasionally, one of the videos would show a house that the roving packs of vandals hadn't messed up yet. And for my money, those were far creepier than the ones with red rum or hail satin misspelled, spray painted next to misshapen pentagrams. The one I remembered the most was from Centralia, PA, where a looming eternal fire from an underground coal mine had been burning since 1962. As you could expect from Earth being literally baked from below, the region was pockmarked with sinkholes and finally caused an evacuation of the town proper. The house they showed was one skipped by vandals, and it painted the picture not of a frantic egress, so much as a quick trip to the local supermarket, with every expectation of returning. There was something illicit about seeing plates left on the table, like the family went out for ice cream 40 years ago, and they'd be back at any time. We weren't meant to see their intimate home life this way, with dish rags tossed on the counters and shoes piled by the front door. Yet, there we were, with a camera's unblinking eye recording all of the clutter they'd no doubt have tidied up had they only known company was coming. Needless to say, I was as hooked as my friends, and deep down, I wanted to see one for myself. As luck would have it, one of my friend's friends, an older boy from his neighborhood named Travis, had recently returned from vacation to see some distant aunt or uncle 17 times removed. They lived in one of the little county hamlets that the town had annexed. That meant it was far from our known civilization, yet completely in the realm of biking, and per Travis, the place was abandoned. The story he told was that a man had owned it, but had abandoned it and gone on the run from the most feared 3-letter agency, the IRS, on account of not paying his taxes. The man's luck in evading the authorities had soured. He'd been hit by a train and died. This meant the IRS couldn't lay claim to the house until it passed probate, and it had been stuck there, ironically out of the government's grasp due to the government's own Gordian knot of red tape, for 7 long years. It was gated and locked up, but trespassing forbidden by a number of signs citing federal registers and law. In Travis's words, "It's perfect. Completely unexplored, completely protected, and I haven't seen it on any channel. We'd be the first." Well, I was thrilled, as were my other friends, Ben, Scott, and Chris. Together, the 5 of us made a plan to bike out and see it. It was the usual skullduggery. Ben would tell his mom that he was staying at mine. I'd tell mine I was staying at Scott's. It all resulted in each set of parents believing us to be under the care of another. And on the appointed day, off we biked into the dwindling late afternoon light, early fall leaves popping and crunching under our whizzing tires. The house was back a ways into a wooded area. It was surrounded by manzanita bushes and scrub oak. Their shiny leaves slipped under our tires as we dismounted and walked alongside them. Even though we were promised and assured by Travis that the only deterrent was the signage, and that there were no cameras or other means by which we'd be caught, it just seemed right to tighten up, quiet down, and if not outright sneak, at least be a little stealthy on approach. The front door was stuck like it had been painted shut. Travis and Scott, the biggest among us, took turns lowering their shoulders and bullying into it. But no joy, the door wouldn't budge. Travis cursed, but my excitement didn't dim. It was really possible that this house was pristine, completely unexplored. That the door was so secured against anyone who'd come before us was a good sign. Ben crept around back and found a window stuck an inch open. That gave me pause. It made no sense a window would be open in a house secured as this one. But Travis assured me this was normal. He pointed out, "It's a kitchen window. They got gas stoves around here, right? So maybe it's empty on purpose, like a precaution against gas leaks building up dangerous fumes in the house while it's empty. It's their way of making sure that their investment doesn't one day just go kablooey." Which made sense to my brain, but my gut didn't accept it quite as well. Still, we'd come out all this way, and like hell I was going to be the one to wimp out. Scott and I gave Ben a boost, and he managed to shove the window up and open. It creaked, ripping the paint on either side open like old wrapping paper. And then we entered, clambering up after each other. The inside of the house smelled musty and cold. I know cold's a temperature, but that house smelled like cold. Like if I closed my eyes and you told me it was an abandoned freezer, I'd have believed it. We separated into a couple of groups, each wanting to stake out something, be the first to see it and call out to the others, bask in the glow of discovery. I stayed in the kitchen, poking around. I found some ancient cans of beans, swollen and distended. Canned goods may last a while, but not forever. These had obviously begun to rot, bloating their confines until their paper labels began to snap and sag over their shiny patinaed bellies. The fridge was opened and shut just as quickly. A glance inside had shown dark shapes nestled on the racks, and the one gust of air it had burped out upon my opening and shutting it was foul, dead. There was no electricity in this house. 7 years had come and gone. Even if the remaining food was desiccated and dried up, I had no desire to look any deeper at it. As I stood there, hand firmly on the long, silver handle of the refrigerator, I both felt and saw something gusted by behind me. I'd have chalked it up to an errant breeze from the still open window, but I'd actually seen a dark shape sprint across the grainy metal shine of the fridge handle. I turned suddenly, expecting to see one of my friends doing a prank, but the kitchen, apart from me and the furniture, was empty. For a moment, I swayed a bit in my shoes. My memory was pulling up some of the Urbex videos we'd seen, about tweakers scuttling out from below, hands full of sawed-off copper pipes, the whites of their eyes beaming like headlights on a car coming to pancake you into the pavement. I felt my hand slip on the handle, my sweat running. I held my breath, listening hard, and then I thought I heard another sound, a footfall on soft wood. My head whipped instinctively to the doorway. The sound had seemed like it had come from out in the living room. I forced myself into movement. I stalked directly towards it before I could lose the nerve. In my head, I was repeating, "It's just my friends, just my dumb friends, being dumb," like I could con reality itself if I believed it hard enough. And I'd soon find out. The kitchen wasn't all that big. With a few steps, I was off the peeling linoleum floor and onto the hardwood floor, gone soft and spongy with the ambient humidity. My head whipped left and right, looking for the source of that shape, of that movement. But the living room, too, was empty. There was no one there but me. I spun in a slow circle, looking around. The house was a split level, with the window we'd boosted Ben into the topmost level. Before me was a half set of stairs. It led to the front door. I glanced at it, thought that there was something off about it, maybe shiny about how it looked, but then let my eyes trace down to where another half set ambled down further to what people normally set up as their den or rumpus room. Given how empty the room was, logically, that seemed like the best bet. Steeling myself, I took steps forward until I stood at the edge of those stairs. I had just reached them when the others emerged from other parts of the house, congregating in the living room with me to excitedly describe what each had seen. "The clothes are still in the closet. They're hung up like he didn't take any with him. Full of holes, though. Guess the mothballs dried up," Ben described. Travis had instead sniffed out a home office. "Computer in there's a total dinosaur. Still, might be fun to lug home and plug in, see what old boy was up to." Computer. That touched an uneasy nerve. Wait, a computer? Sure, big old desktop. Monitor must weigh a ton, Travis confirmed, Chris nodding alongside behind him. I thought back to the story of the place. But you said the IRS was after this guy for taxes, and he went on the run, right? I mean, wouldn't they have taken his computer once he ran off? You know, try to see what he was searching, if he booked train tickets or something? The other boys had been gassing on about their finds, but at my question, maybe my tone, they stopped, turning to me and Travis fully, their own voices raising in that question octave. Yeah, hey, what about that? And to my growing horror, I saw a look cross Travis's face I did not want to see standing in this dead house. It was the look of a small child who's been caught in a lie, followed by the sly smugness of having duped you in the first place. Travis, this is the house you talked about, right? The one with the guy who went on the lam? And at this, Travis had the nerve to chuckle. There is a house like that, but I don't think I said this one was it. The collective, What do you mean? Greek chorus from my friends was immediate. With enough badgering, we got the truth of it out of Travis, that while the locals said that the man on the run from his taxes had happened in this area, he'd simply assumed this house was one and the same. But as he'd explored, he'd found things that didn't match the story. Namely, children's things. See, the guy in the story was a confirmed lifelong bachelor. He didn't even have a wife, let alone a kid. Yet in the office there'd been pictures of both, several of them. A smiling woman, gardening in a sun hat, standing at a church, and a beaming little boy. That's right. I mean, in the closet, there were dresses too, Ben added. His voice was nervy and higher pitched, but it sounded almost like he was pleased to have figured out something, solved a piece of mystery, instead of a cold realization of what this was. Travis held up his hands in supplication, admitting that it was an educated guess, and that ultimately he was just as surprised as we were about it not being the same house. Guys, I noticed in my periphery that Chris's eyes were big, and in that sort of delayed processing way, I realized he'd been saying, guys, trying to get our attention quietly for a minute before anyone, me, noticed. But the others still hadn't. Scott was ranking Travis to the dogs and back about the house, and how he'd only come because this one was at least protected. Travis fired back, asking what that even meant. Guys. I was turning to Chris. In the dim light, the wide whites of his eyes seemed to glow, and now his face was too, for the blood had run out of it, leaving him as pale as, well, a ghost. Hey, guys. I tried to boost Chris's voice, get the others to stop, but Scott was on a roll. What I mean is, if this is the house that was in probate and the IRS wants it, they've got the thing protected. If this isn't the house, then any random serial killer psychopath could be in here. They could be, I don't know, living in the freaking walls. Guys! Chris was still quiet, but his voice broke on the S. Alarmed, I saw the corners of his eyes glistening, then dripping tears. The others turned, their faces at once changing from enraged arguing to concern, and then fear. Chris kept his voice level, but the volume dropped back down to a sotto whisper. By the front door, the stairs down to the basement. There's a man there. He's behind you. My breath was hitched in my throat. The previous little zing of panic from the kitchen was now thudding through me, my heartbeat feeling like a knocking hand. What's the correct thing to do? Well, it surely wasn't what we did, which was all whip our heads collectively to face where Chris's was faced. And for a moment, the breath was truly sucked out of me. For standing there, in the hallway of the lower landing, a dull gleam of metal hanging down by his side, was a long-haired, bearded man, watching us. And like our eyes falling upon him woke him from some curse, he raised the hand holding the metal and let out a shrieking, piercing scream, which we all collectively decided was a very good idea, as we began to shriek and scream too. Then there was pandemonium. The front door, the one that stuck like it had been painted over, standing on this side, we could suddenly see why it wouldn't open. It had been taped over, layers and layers of clear packing tape. The man had barricaded himself in and made sure no one was getting through that door. We all turned on heel and bumping and stampeding into each other, we ran like hell back to the kitchen, to the window that we'd pried open. From behind us, the shrieking continued, sounding almost hyena-like. It undulated like laughter. But there was nothing funny about this, nothing funny at all. Scott about threw Ben and Chris through the window, and then scampered through himself, followed by Travis, leaving me last. In their hustle, they'd knocked the window loose. Now it rocked on its top hinge, swaying like a loose tooth in a socket. "Run!" someone screamed, and it took me a moment to realize it wasn't any of us, but the man, and that voice was close because he closed the distance from the entryway, through the living room, to the kitchen, to right behind us at our window. As if I needed confirmation, like my mind wasn't already in slow-mo recording this, the scariest, most horrible day of my life. The man's hand clamped onto my shoulder, like a bird's talon. No fooling. As soon as he clamped on me, my mind was picturing some red-tailed hawk swooping down and capturing a field mouse in his claws. It was as though I could feel the hot pinch of bird claws penetrating through me, a stitch hot as lightning racing up my side like I'd run a miles-long race. And I was propelled forward, through the window. We were off, running, screaming, to our bikes. Any thought of stealth or potential security cameras well and truly gone. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking we deserved it, creepy crawling through someone else's property like that. And nowhere will you see me excuse myself or indicate that we were in the right there. We were young and excited to do what we saw on TV, as cliche as that is, and half the allure came from knowing it was a thing to get away with, meaning there was an element of wrongness about it. We were dumb kids doing a dumb thing. We were lucky to get away as clean as we did. You don't need to worry about any repeats from us. Well, not from me anyway. Because should I ever get the urge again, I have a souvenir to remind me what a terrible idea that is. Remember that hot stitch up my side? At the time, I chalked that up to adrenaline, panic, maybe psychosomatism. Well, no. The shiny metal the guy had in his hand was a box cutter. And I know this because once I got back to my house, parents already asleep, one less thing to explain. I pulled up my shirt and found the slanted rectangle of the box cutter blade stuck into my side, leaving a half-inch paper-cut thin slice down by my right hip. It wasn't too bad. It came right out, bleeding like a faucet at first, and it eventually healed, then scarred up, became one of those ghostly little marks you end up peppered with by the time you're an adult. And this one has a purpose. Every time I see that scar, I can smell the cold house again. And I promise myself to leave the urban exploration to the morons on TV. And that's story 209. He's not alone. I too enjoy these sort of found footage exploration videos. It's such an interesting peek into the past, and into a past that usually doesn't make the papers. Like, go back now and look up anything from the 1980s. You'll get a pastiche of travel, lifestyle, business, sports, music videos, what movies we're in. But where do you learn about people's lives, their real lives? Things like this family has the tradition of opening their presents on Christmas Eve, or that family has the tradition of tucking their pajamas under their pillows in the morning because they're not dirty enough to wash every day, yet not clean enough to be returned to a drawer. Where can you learn about the real, intimate, everyday lives of people? Well, one way is to make like Ness in Earthbound and just wander up into people's houses, check their trash cans for hamburgers. You know, normal, logical things. But exploring abandoned houses, it's a window into another world. One that's past, that try as we might to revisit through old movie marathons or returning cycles in style, we can never go back to again. Did you like the story? If you did, please feel free to share your thoughts and comments. Email and socials are in the description and comments are below. Liking and subscribing is always appreciated, but I'm just delighted that you tuned in today. And if you tune in next week, we can do it all over again. Until then, take care, strangers.